let's continue, and this time instead of sending a user to a page, let's add a modal. So when the user clicks on this button, it's gonna pop up a modal and they can edit the profile. And for that, we're going to use a component instead of page. So back in our code, I'm gonna open up the terminal and we're gonna generate a component inside our users folder. So ng generate component, or C for short, user update. If you prefer to use a page with a URL instead of a modal, you can follow up the post the same way as we did in there. Now here we have our update, and this time it didn't create a module because it's just a common component. Now this code needs to be done inside our user profile, which is the page that is gonna load when the user clicks on the create button. So here we're gonna create a function called, let's do it, update. And for that we need to call the Modal controller from Ionic. Let's take a look at the documentation. Down here, Ion Modal. And as you can see, we can call the Modal controller with the create method and pass a component. You can also pass some props, which is the information, the user data we're gonna get from the profile we send to this Modal for it to update. Oh, we do that later throughout. So the usage, if you go down here, we need to import the Modal controller from Ionic Angular. So up in here, I'm just gonna paste that Modal controller. And here to be a public Modal controller, which is gonna call that Modal controller on top. Now down here in the update, we need to make it an async function because we need to wait for the modal to be created so we can have access to it. So we do const modal, and it's this.modalcontroller.create. And as you can see, it takes an object with the component that you're going to use and also the props. If you're in doubt what you can use, if you control click, it will load the Modal controller typing from the Ionic Angular. So if you take a look in here, the Modal options, and you control click again, here's all the information that you can find about that component, of all the properties, the things that you can set on it, the mode, and some other animation as well. So this is just so you don't need to go back to the documentation to see how you can use the component. So first is the component, and we're gonna call the user update. User update component. Now when you do that, it's gonna be imported up in here. So now that you have this, we're gonna await for this Modal controller to create and then load the user update. So we need to await for that here, and then you're gonna have access to the modal, and then we can just return it, modal.present, and this is gonna show the modal. Let's update our profile page so we can call this function in it. So back in our HTML, here on the bottom, we can just do a click, and this is the syntax you use in Angular. You wrap in parentheses when you're doing event, and then you can just do update. Now let's take a look. I'm going to load my server. Now here in our page, there are two things going to happen when you click this button. You're going to have two errors. The first one, no factory component found for this user update. Now, the reason for that is we didn't add that component anywhere in our template here. So Angular doesn't know where that component comes from or what to do. To fix that, you need to tell, because if the user profile is using that component, and it's nowhere showing over here, so Angular doesn't know about it. You need to tell this user profile module where to find it and what component is it. So you first go to the ng module. In case you are not showing the profile, the component in your template, you need to add it as an entry component. So now the entry component is a way for you to tell Angular about that component you want to use, because if you don't say it inside the template, you need to tell in the module here under this entry. So it's an array and you can add as many as you want. So it's the update component. You tell it. Now back in our page, if you go to the profile, we're gonna have another error, and that is not part of any module. And for that you need to declare as well. This is a really common error in Angular when you start out with it, that you create a component but Angular doesn't know about it. So the first thing you need to do, you need to tell the module that is using that component is, you need to declare that component to it. So just say to, hey module, just load this component and here is the path for it. So it gets updated on the top and you declare. So and then you declare the component and Angular will know, that module will know about it. So you could use, instead of calling with the entry components in here, you could just use the selector, which is this one here, and add it to the HTML page, just like so, like this. And then that would load that component. So if you reload, you see here, user update works, that's the component we added. But this one, it won't work because we are not adding it in our HTML like we did over here. So if you remove, you need to declare it in the entry components because it's not on your template. Now if you save it and you click in here, and it's gonna open the modal and it's gonna display it. So as you can see, you have a modal with backdrop. When you click on the backdrop, it closes it. Under mobile phones, it loads a full page and you won't have the where to click to dismiss. You can use ESC, but mobile doesn't have escape key. So let's add some buttons here so we can cancel and close the modal from itself. Now in our modal layout, in the HTML, let's first add the buttons to close and open. So I'm going to use Ion header and then Ion toolbar. Now let's just do a title. After we can do an array of buttons, so Ion buttons. And the slot is gonna be the end. You're gonna add two buttons, one to cancel and one to save. And when the user click, we can call a cancel function. So save. Now it's getting an error here because we don't have these functions created yet. So let's go to the component.ts and here we can create both save and cancel functions. So let's just add the console log for cancel and save. Now the error is gone here on the HTML. Now let's make this cancel function works before we take a look. For that we need to import the modal controller again. So modal controller. Now VS Code already imported here on the top. Now on the console function, we can just do this.modal controller dismiss. Now with this done, let's take a look. My server is running. Here back in a page, if I click the modal, we have both here. Save, you have the console log in there, and cancel, it's going to dismiss. Now on the mobile, we can now close properly. Now let's start to add some inputs and the image update here inside our main body in the update component. Back in our code inside our update component, let's add the Ion content. And here again, let's add the grid. You do not need to add Ion grid on every component. I just like to use it because it makes it really simple to place stuff in the page. So let's go again. Ion thumbnail, image. So I'm going to use the same. The avatar 150. So inside we're gonna add a div which is gonna hold the label and the input for our image upload. So here we need a label and an input. Now here I'm using a normal input, not the Ion input, because the Ion input is basically a wrapper around, and if you use it, you're gonna have to dig inside that wrapper to find this input. So in order to keep it simple, you can just use the input, and it's much easier like that as well. Here the type is a file. Now we need to link this label to this input, and you do that with the for. So it's gonna be avatar file input. You can name it however you like, as long as you use the same here and you give it an ID with that name. And the input is gonna accept images. And well, I'm just gonna leave it any type of image. You can do PNG, JPEG, whatever. Now for the label, we're gonna add an icon. And I chose the camera here, but you can check out the Ionic website and change it. Now let's take a look. I still have my server running. Alright, my avatar is there with the icon and the file, which you can open. Now let's add some class to this div so we can target it and add some CSS. Just gonna add avatar overlay. Now on the component.css, SCSS, I'm gonna first gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna add the Ion grid 100%, so we can center the things in the middle, or we can use it to center our components better. Ion row, height. This time I'm gonna do 70%, and also I'm gonna align the stuff in it. So center and text align, center. Now here's the part thumbnail. Here the size will be 150, and the border radius 50%. Margin auto again. This is the same as we used before, but now this time I'm going to use position relative because you need to use that to target the icon into it. Now the Ion icon. I'm adding the Ion icon inside the thumbnail because we want to target only this icon here, so we don't mess around, we don't mess up with the other icons. So before I do that, let's take a look on the page. There you go, have in the middle. Now we need to push this icon here to the middle and hide this file. So top 50%. I'm not gonna go through the details in here. This is just plain CSS. And the position has to be absolute. For the color, I'm going to use a variable that comes from the theme. We're gonna check out the themes later. And the font size, I'm gonna just increase the icon font size. Just need a colon over there. Now if you take a look, we have our icon in the middle. When you click, it opens up. So let's make this button disappear. Now we tackle the thumbnail. Now we're gonna use that class, the overlay. Position absolute again. The overlay is just a shadow that is going to be added at the top. Now for the background, I'm gonna add RGBA, so we can add black color and some alpha. Let's do 0.5 now, so it's a little bit see-through. There we go. Now let's fix the button. Is the ID that we added, and the position absolute. And here we just change the opacity to 0. So you disappear, you don't remove. There are some hacks that people use to push the thing aside, but then when you click at the button, it's not gonna work properly. Depends on the size of your screen. So this will always work no matter the size of the screen. Now let's get the information from this file input. Our CSS is done. We just need to create a function on the save that is going to load the file input. So here on the file input, we're gonna listen for a change, and that we can do with the change method. So let's call it update photo URL. Now here we need to pass the event, and the way you target event in Angular, you do the $sign and then the event. Let's go ahead and create this function. Can do it in here. So we need the event. And let's just console log the event in there. Just gonna add any just to get rid of the error. Now let's go ahead and try it out, this function. You click. Now we have the event listed in here. Now let's go ahead and add the user inputs for the name. We have our photo URL is working. Back in our code, just under the Ion thumbnail, I'm going to create a form. And inside we're going to do an Ion list. To Ion list header. And for each Ion input, you're going to do an Ion item with a label and the Ion input itself. And here in the Ion label, it takes a position property that can be stack, floating. This is the way it's going to display the placeholder in it. If you take a look at the Ion input, so if you just scroll down, as you can see here in the examples, there's a position floating, fixed, and stacked. And this is how it's going to look, the placeholder. So I'm going to do stack for now. And I'm going to copy this a few times, and we're going to change the entries for it. Below here, I'm going to add also another one, but instead of Ion input, it's going to be an Ion text area. And that's going to be like a bio or something. So here inside the Ion label, you can do the placeholder names. So display name. Now this is our own user, so we can add as many as you want. I'm just going to add these ones now so we can take a look how it looks and feels like. Now, when you save it, you can take a look now. If you open it up, we have all our details in here. And again, that positioning here, if you do floating, which is really nice as well. It will be like this. Sometimes I do prefer stacked, but that's up to you. So far our component is looking nice. So we have our item, our cancel button, save, and we have our list. Our input button works as well with the event. We are grabbing it. And also here under the bio, because it's a text area, it accepts a few more parameters. If you take a look at the code, here on the text area, we can add rows. And we need to add it between brackets because this is the way Angular template works. And we can just say 4 lines. Should be enough. And this works exactly like the native HTML with the parameters from the native. So now it's a little bit bigger, the entry here.